Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, where today's topic is Throttling Overview for Finance and Operations Integrations. My name is Evan, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams Live Events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, and by participating in this session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions at the end of the event. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now, let's get started. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Haitham Saeed, Senior Program Manager. Haitham, over to you.
Thanks, Evan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session for the Throttling Overview in Finance and Operations. Let's go through quickly the agenda. So we will be reviewing some of the important points related to what are the current set of challenges that we are facing when it comes to data integrations using OData and Custom Service, and what's the impact on the other online users on the system from a resource perspective, and so on and so forth. We will go through some of the throttling concepts, throttling designs, and how it will work, and what's exactly meant by throttling in F&O, and we will figure out the priority-based throttling concept. And then we will move on to what throttling is not. I mean, what this capability or functionality will do and what it will not do for F&O. Then we will go to a very quick demo to show you how the capability is configured and how to start using it, and some important points related to the next set of actions expected to be able to adapt to this new capability, and then we will open to the Q&A. So let me start by just giving you some of the data that we are having when it comes to life-site issues and system performance issues. Sometimes we run into situations where OData and custom service integrations start seeing random failures, system slowness, affecting other workloads, affecting online users. Sometimes the batch jobs get affected by this slowness. The database might have some bottlenecks caused by those requests not being able to be processed. And the fact that the system has a finite set of resources, each environment is provisioned with a specific set of resources, and most of the work or F&O workloads share the same pool of resources, whether it's OData, custom service, or even online users. In other words, interactive versus non-interactive sessions served by each and every application server, which is the iOS. Once the environment is subjected to overutilization, then we start see a negative impact on the experience in terms of slowness, sometimes timeouts. I might have an integration running with, for example, like a bad design or a bad slow executing queries, and then it start to get blocking the SQL server, and then the requests start to get queued. And by doing so, we start having sometimes like our monitors detect, or we have like some reported incidents when it comes to like system is very slow, system is not able to process some of my request, which impacts at the end the ability to perform the daily business operations. And here is where we wanted to think about a mechanism to avoid these situations. Another set of challenges is the initial sizing estimate. The current existing process, as most of you all know, is I would have a sizing estimate before I provision my production environment, and I would fill during my environment planning. And this sizing estimates, it's all about like what is my expected usage, what is my expected transaction volumes, number of users, workload used, how I'm going to use my integrations. Am I using batch? Am I using DIXF? Am I using OData, and so on and so forth? What's my peak transaction hours? And then based on that, once I fill this particular sizing estimate, I start having like my environment to get provisioned. And most of the cases, if it's not all of the cases, the estimate will vary versus the actual usage, whether it's like 6 months after, 1 year after. Sometimes due to like inaccurate filling of this estimate, the environment can be under provisioned, or like the normal increase of the load during the application life cycle. This will be the primary reason for resource inavailability, and which will lead to those kind of unwanted situation when it comes to timeouts or system busy processing other requests and not functioning as expected. However, in most of the case, the initial plan will vary from reality. As time progresses, the load will increase, the business can expand, and the traffic pattern as well. That being the case, overutilization of resources will happen. And again, the experience will start see timeouts and random failures and general slowness affecting not only integrations, but end users as well. After that, there is a known pattern that we usually see when some of the clients are using some retries logic, especially when they simply retries on error. When the system is out of resource and the retries continues, we can see that requests sometimes run multiple times and can lead to exponential deterioration, which can put the system in a state that will start queuing other requests than those requests itself will get timeout. For example, I can have like my system is not in a very healthy state condition, and one of the user is opening a form and he's trying to run some business logic, and then he will get the message that says that system is busy processing your request, or it will just go in timeouts, which can lead to a deterioration in the experience, and then definitely this is not where we want to be. Throttling is not a new concept, but let's try to understand how it will be implemented in finance and operation. If I start with the sizing, we fill the environment, the sizing estimate before the environments get provisioned. And then once I have my sandbox and UAT and finish all of these processes, I start filling my sizing. Then the environment gets provisioned based on the data I input. And as business goes live and transactions start to happen, here we will start to see the variance we referred to earlier. And this is where the throttling functionalities will come in play. Throttling in F&O, it's a bit different than the known concept of throttling, and it is here to make sure that no matter integration traffic will be, no system of overutilization will happen. It's just a balance between the available resources and the ability to process and serve online users while the system is in stress mode. How to reduce the impact on the online users and make sure the system will be able to serve integrations as well. This is the main objective here from the throttling. When it comes to the approach that we thought about is, first we need to understand our workload patterns. What is my OData and custom service traffic pattern? And assuming that when the throttling will kick in, how is my throttling engine will deal with those kind of actions required when the system is stressed out? And here the monitoring aspects come in play. And to do this, we will provide data and logs in LCS monitoring, just to simulate the throttling and help understand like what is the traffic from an OData and custom service perspective. What is the number of requests? When is my highest peak of requests? What kind of request I am sending? Is it OData? Is it custom service? Which one is more than the other one? And based on that, it's very, very important to understand my workload pattern and just to determine a very important point. Where do I need to make some changes? Do I need to enhance my design? Do I need to add some methodological like retry logics and so on and so forth? Once this understanding is established, the next step is to configure throttling priorities. And here is where the priority-based throttling come in play for FNO. It's just not I'm gonna throttle your requests based on whatever will come in first. No, I will give you the ability to configure priorities for your integrations. And these priorities, as we will speak about it later, will help in actually when the system is out of resources and I want to throttle, I will throttle from the lower priority, and then I'll go to the medium, and then I'll go to the higher ones. Once the system the actual throttle will happen, we will send a 429 in the response header. And with this 429, we will send a time that the client can use for a more graceful retry. In other ways, an error message will be thrown like, please retry after X amount of time. And the client can implement this in their retry logic. So the request can be processed in a more like a graceful way and in a safest way to give the system the ability to recover some of the resources to process the next request. So the expectation is when the client will use this retry pattern, we can prevent the system from consuming all the resources and also to maintain the capacity for serving other workloads and reduce the impact on other areas. So moving to what throttling is not. In finance and operation, throttling is not like enforcing rate limits. The objective here is not limitation. There is no current limits. And we certainly can have this discussion, but when we have the guidelines for it. And when we are there, we will provide those guidelines, then we can start this conversation. So again, throttling is not enforcing any API rate limits. Means I won't say the system won't throw an error saying that you have reached the maximum number of requests you can do in this X amount of time, or you have reached your thresholds. It's not that way. The priority-based throttling, again, to ensure the balance between the integration and the other workload pattern to maintain a safe zone for other online users to keep doing their business while the system is out of resources. Today, the current implementation of the throttling will be implemented for OData and custom service integration only. DIXF is not enabled currently, and we would really like to take your feedback and learn throughout this process so we can enable DIXF in the future and more workloads. As currently Batch has its own throttling mechanism, so the only thing that we are focusing on within this implementation is the OData and custom service. Throttling actually, and this is a very important point, is not a solution for a bad integration design, whether it is an entity issue or a code issue. For example, we have seen so many cases where I would have a query with missing indexes, or we have a query with like huge number of joins. And the execution of this query is very, very, very slow. And it results in very slow execution on the SQL Server. So the SQL Server does not go back to the application server, which is the AOS with the response, and then means the response is not currently processed. And then more requests come in and more users come in, and then those requests start queuing, and then at the end, the system will be stuck forever executing this request. So throttling is not here to solve this issue. But when I see, and this is, let me take it back a bit to the monitoring phase. When I start to inspect my requests, when I am throttled, what's the time of the day or my peak areas where I would have like throttling actions, I would be able to decide whether I would need to implement a specific retry logic, or like I need to fix my query, or I need to fix my design. Throttling, priority-based throttling. This is where in the system where I would be able to configure my throttling. This is the throttling form that will be used, and it's a very simple form that actually maps an authentication type with a priority. FNO use two types of authentications or two types of integrations: Azure Active Directory application-based integration, or a user-based integrations. One of the quickest examples of the user-based integration is, for example, Excel integrations, import to export to Excel. This is actually using OData in the background. So this simple form will give you the ability to map one of these authentication types with a priority, so the throttling engine can honor those priorities while there is throttling activities happening in the system when it's out of resources. We have also provided a role which called Integration Priority Manager that the system admin can assign to personas in charge of this particular integration, and this actually will help scope this particular duty or this particular task to a specific set of users, instead of just giving system admin to people to do this kind of setup. Throttling manager will honor those information in this form, and then the last piece of it, which will be the monitoring, which can be done in LCS. And from a monitoring perspective, in each and every sandbox and production environment, if I will go to the environment monitoring, as I will speak about in the in our demo today, I would have two types of queries: request throttled and all throttling events. The request throttled simply will show which requests are being throttled. But my throttling events will show each and every request processed in the system, whether it's throttled or no. So I can actually analyze and understand more my integration pattern, as we spoke in the previous slides. I'll switch to the system to show you how this is implemented and what is actually the activity required. So if I go to my homepage in Finance and Operation, and if I switch to my system administration, I would have two main forms here: the Azure Active Directory and the throttling priority mapping. First, any integration in FNO, it has to have a client ID. Client ID, which is the app ID, is mapped to a specific user in FNO, and by enabling this, we are authorizing this application to use the data from FNO. So here I would set all my app IDs, and I will map them to a specific user that will run this particular integration. And this is actually an existing configuration, and this is the way that integration is set up currently before even the throttling. Once I do that, I would move to my throttling priority form. And here it's a very simple form that will let you choose your authentication type, whether you want it Azure Active Directory application based or a user based. If I select an AAD application, I would need to select an app ID, and this actually will read the data from the previous form or the previous table that we were referring to. And then once I do my selection, I would assign which priority I would choose for my integration. So the throttling engine can start, a throttling request based on the information defined here. I would do this for my multiple integrations, and then, for example, a scenario where I have now at the month end, or I have a request that most of my integrations, for example, come from users during export and exports for journals, or based on my business needs, I would, for example, put my users and then assign the priorities for them. Once I finish this setup, and I perform my day-to-day business transactions, and then the system comes and be out of resources, the throttling engine will start to kick in, throttling the lower integration and then the medium integration, going to the higher integration. Let's assume system has reached the thresholds for the low integration, and then still the resources are under constraints. Then I will move to the next thresholds, which is the medium. So all the traffic coming with a medium priority will be throttled, and any traffic coming with the high priority will still go through. Worst case scenario, the system is completely out of resource due to like a significant issue, and I reach the higher thresholds, which is defined into the system. Then most of the requests will get throttled until the system gets some capacity back. So let's conclude the configuration part, and that's the only thing that we would do to configure the throttling. If I move to LCS, and from the environment monitoring, if I select my activities, I will get to a row logs. All the row logs contain canned queries, which can give you some sort of like data and information that you can use to troubleshoot and investigate what is happening on the system. So let's assume you have some integration running, and you will start you started to see some throttling events, or as we speak, like as we mentioned earlier in the monitoring phase, which is a simulation of the throttling, which means that even if I see a request gets throttled here, no 429 will be actually sent. So this means a simulation for throttling, so I can adapt, learn, play with it, and then I can decide where I need to do my changes before going to production, as we will discuss in the call to action section. And here, as you can see, you will see whether your request is OData or custom service, whether it's an app ID only or it's a user ID, and then which priority is assigned to it, whether it's throttled or no, and the timestamp that this request got throttled. Also, this particular form provides the ability to export this data to Excel, so I can do more analysis for my day-to-day operations and throttling events. Throttling will be available as a public preview in platform update 37, 10.0.13, which will be available as GA September 18th this month, on the 18th for download, and it will be broadcasted, I think, a week after, maybe 2 weeks after. And here is actually where there is some important steps that I think we should be thinking about and taking note of them and start using them. The idea is, when I go to production and the throttling will start being the default capability in finance and operation, that we should be ready. We should be ready in first, if there is any design change required from a code perspective, from a query optimization perspective, from a retry logic perspective, simply to adapt to these new capabilities. It's very important to test those changes, see this behavior, and the most important aspect of that is to get your feedback for any issues, any design change required, any new requirements. So when it comes to prod, we need to start using the LCS monitor. The LCS monitor will give you a simulation of your current throttling activities without sending any 429s. So you will see that this request gets throttled or this request is not throttled, but you will not get any 429s, means there is no interruption whatsoever on the production environment. The second step is to validate. How I would validate my current designs versus what's required to achieve the most stable business operation when it comes to prod. Currently in the UAT, you can start configure your priorities to enable real throttling. Once I do that in the sandboxes, I would start to have 429s. So I would, if I need to update my retry logic, I would do that. If I want to fine tune my throttling configuration, like for example, I was using like different mappings and I want to change the priorities for those particular mappings, I can do that. I can review my data and then I would do my changes and implement them. And then I would do a revalidation. Once I am confident about my current setup that it's not impacting my operation. And again, I want to enforce on this above that, the most important thing which we are expecting is your feedback. So we can work on any issues, or if there is any requirements that we can do, we will be happy to do that before throttling becomes like default in finance and operation. Throttling will be the default engine and will start throttling any request as of April 2021, which will give us some time to adapt to this change, play with it. So after April 2021, if there is no priorities are configured in the system, throttling will enforce the default thresholds and limit. So that's the recommended process between now and April 2021 in order to adapt, learn, and go with that new capabilities in finance and operation. So our request is to start testing, learning, make the necessary change, play with it, and give us your feedback. So we want to take this time to learn from your experiences so we can address any requirements or issues on the spot. The other critical point actually is to get connected and collaborate more throughout this process. And I would like to kindly ask of you if you can join this data management Yammer group. It's an active group on Yammer, which has all the topics and conversations and collaborations between Microsoft partners and customers for any issues, any requirements, or like new functionalities requests. Those kind of collaboration we will need actually to drive this process smoothly. We want to get together and we want to work together to enable throttling in a staged manner. So that's actually the purpose of this particular group, and I would love to see you there. And that was actually the throttling overview for finance operation. I would like to thank you, and we can open for Q&A.
Atham, we do have a handful of questions here. I think the first one that could be addressed is regarding the time span for returning a 429 request.
What would be the time span for API return of the 429 request? Does this also cover timeouts for usual update requests we are encountering now? So the first part of the question, so this will be calculated by the throttling engine based on the thresholds and available resources. The throttling engine will calculate this particular time and it will send this time in the response header. So I would have like a request when it gets throttled and I would have a 429, it will say that please retry after this X amount of time. This X amount of time can be in seconds, can be like in minutes. It depends on how the system is calculating the threshold based on the available resources. For the second part, that this cover also timeouts, sorry, I don't get what is meant by usual update requests we are encountering now. So if you can clarify this would be great. Second question, is throttling dependable of the tier of your F&O environment is running on? That's actually a good question. No, it is not. And this is why we are not enforcing a specific limits. Like, again, the system will not say that you have reached a limit of 100 requests in 5 minutes, hence we are throttling you. We are not there. And due to this difference in infrastructures and in environments, topologies, and definition, the throttling will be based on the available resources only. So depending on my environment size, the throttling will calculate these thresholds based on the environment that you have. So the limits will vary when it comes to resource availability and not with a specific set of limits. Limits discussion can start once we have a more into like a unified infrastructures with the published guidelines and limits. Then we can have this discussion of like the rates will be this for this particular environments and so on and so forth. So the short answer is no, it's not depending on the environment. Another question is, I assume DIXF means the data management. Correct. We noticed that user initiate large batch of data upload using DIXF project and slow the system, especially at month ends. Would throttling be helpful to control this, assuming you enable it in future? Definitely, definitely, and that's where we want to go. Currently, we will not implement DIXF throttling because DIXF sometimes run into batch or sometimes it runs into async operations. So it's a bit different than the OData and Custom Service. And there is lots to be learned in this particular space. And definitely we want to go there. We want to make sure that the system resources are available while using those kind of heavy operations. So yes, and this is where we will leverage your experience and we want to learn from you and we want to start this discussion once we enable the throttling for OData and Custom Service and everything is stable, everyone adapts to it, no problems, everything is fine, then we will start looking into definitely DIXF. Another question, if a production environment is regularly running out of resources, wouldn't Microsoft need to resize it? Is that not correct? I would thank you for that question, and that's 100% correct. And there is lots of aspects in here. And this where the monitoring actually and understanding my patterns will help in. Do I get throttled like in spikes, one-offs? do I get throttled in a specific amount of like, you know, a specific time of the day, or when I do a specific time operations? Are my other users affected? So let's assume most of my requests, even with high priorities, get throttled. My users are facing slowness. So that's something that is beyond integration and throttling. And definitely, I would strongly suggest, as this is actually what we see in some of the cases, then due to any reason, you know, the estimate, the delta between the estimate and the sizing estimate and the actual production infrastructure is different. Whether the sizing estimate was not accurately done, or there was an increase in user load, like business expanded, for whatever any reasons. If all of these conditions are met, then definitely the correct way is to resize the environment. And I would really like you, if anyone is facing this particular issue, they should do a sizing revisit, which I would go to the sizing estimate again, refill it again, and make sure I have learned throughout the experience, throughout the system. I would do another estimate, mark it as active, and then Microsoft will look into it. And definitely Microsoft has its own tool, you know, to make sure that usage is more than the environment sizing, and hence the correct decision here is to go and resize this environment before we start you know, looking into other area, if that might answer the question. Another question, is there any specification on legal entity? Short answer is no. I mean, I don't know exactly if there is any specific requirements for this question. It's not that clear to me, but if there is anything related to throttling and legal entities, currently no. But again, during the preview and within our collaboration group, if we see, I mean, all ideas are welcomed. If we see a need to like look into configure throttling by legal entity, by some sort of like a process, definitely we can do that. One of the ideas that actually we got in our early discussion, and we are looking into it, and it will be implemented in future releases, which is the ability to configure these priorities based on a scheduling. And that's something that, for example, that came from our partner folks out there, and we love this idea, and we will look into it. So if there is any sort of like new ideas, new requirements, please join the YAML group, and we will be happy to discuss all of these ideas. Will throttling impact the dual write capabilities? I don't have a clear answer for that. I'm not the expert in dual write, but anything that will be using OData and Custom Service will be impacted by these capabilities. Unfortunately, one of my colleagues couldn't make it today. Most probably we are having internet issues due to some fires in our areas. So most probably this is why he can join, but we will be happy to publish our FAQ, frequently asked questions sections, that will be shared with the presentation and the deck, and definitely the answer will be there for this particular questions. But again, if like for example, batch and DXF doesn't use custom service on OData, so throttling will not impact those kind of operations. Can the throttling engine be configured like thresholds? So that's currently is controlled by the Microsoft and the throttling engine. So the direct answer to this question is no, the thresholds cannot be configured. So every system will have its specific a set of resources and infrastructures, and based on that, the engine will detect these resources and will start to implement the defined threshold based on the resources availability versus the resource limitations. So currently there is no way to configure any thresholds. Well, another question, will throttling impact the data integration capabilities of the Power Platform? Again, the answer will be if any OData and custom service are used in any type of integration, there will be subject to throttling. So just to clear out this particular area, so any integration with F&O when it comes to OData and custom service, it can be an app-based, which is an application that you register in your Azure AD, and then you authorize it in F&O, which will give you an app ID. And then the secrets of this app ID will come within the context of the request. And then this particular app ID will be mapped to a specific user in F&O for authorization. And this is what we will call the Azure AD application-based integration. The second type is the user-based. And we have seen some of the early native apps that send the client secrets within the request itself, or a functionality within the system, like the Excel integrations. This is what we call user-based. So any integration that will come with the context of a user and doesn't require an Azure App AD, that will be the user-based. And for OData and custom service request, this will be subject to throttling. And if the request comes with an app ID, this also will be subject to throttling as an application based. Will this also come to D365 for HR? So both of them use the same platform and same bits. So as long they are using the same platform updates and the same bits, then yes, this functionality will be available through. Is there a list of the default throttling settings priorities? It's not quite clear for me, but I'll try to answer. So when you have the system, the form will be empty. This means then from now till April, there is no throttling will happen whatsoever on the application. From a monitoring perspective, yes, you will see some events just to give you what is your pattern. So assuming two scenarios here. The first scenario will be in the preview. If you configured your priorities, then you will need to go to this form and start inputting your app IDs and users and map the priorities. Then throttling will kick in, and you will get 429s for your requests on Sandbox, and you will still get the monitors. If you don't configure anything in the priorities, nothing will happen. You will just get some data in the monitor. That's the first scenario. The second scenario, assuming that we are in April 2021, and then throttling is GA and it's the default capability in finance and operation. If you don't configure anything in this particular form, throttling will start kicking in by just treating everything as default, and then the first request that needs to be throttled will get throttled. So the idea here is when I configure my priorities and the throttling engine decided to kick in, it will go and check, hey, this request, does it have a priority? Yes or no? It doesn't have a priority, it will get the default threshold. If I see any lower priorities and this request is a medium or at high, I will start throttling lower requests and then keep this one to maintain a smooth operation for the business, assuming that this is like a critical business nature process. And then eventually when the resources are, consumed more and more, it will go like above the low, it will go to the medium and then eventually to the high. So you will need to configure your priorities to be able to let the system not to throttle your highest priority integrations. Well, throttling also comes to D365 PO. Sorry, it's not clear what's PO. I would assume PO, as per my knowledge, is purchase order. Maybe I'm wrong, but if yes, purchase order is like a form in the application that is used through the online user request, and the online user request doesn't use OData or custom service, and there will be no throttling whatsoever for any user interaction on the system when it comes to online request. If that's the question, then that's a very important point I want to mention. Any user that will be using the application in terms of doing any online operations, adding orders, deleting orders, confirming shipments, pick slips, packing slips, doing a PO, opening the all customers, all of these operations will not be throttled whatsoever. The only case that throttling might come in place, if, for example, I'm a user who is using like the journal, I'm doing some journal, and I will import some of the journals in my Excel. Sorry, using my Excel into the system. So this functionality use OData in the background. So if the system is out of resources while doing this particular operation, then it might get throttled. Other than that, there will be no throttling whatsoever for the end users. Will throttling be enabled for cloud-hosted dev environments? And if so, is there a way to turn it off for dev VMs? Resources are likely to be more constrained in these one boxes instance, and I would make testing more difficult if the requests are being throttled. That's a very important question. Thank you for that. So we will be publishing some guidelines to do that. Currently, as all of these are using the same bits for the platform, so throttling will be there. And I think it would be the best case scenario is to reach, when we reach there, we would have this discussion, because I mean, comparing the impact, the exact impact in test labs and in like simulated scenarios would vary from the actual usage, and definitely the purpose and the objective is not just to throttle or just to impact the business operation. No, it's just to stabilize and like streamline the operations. So definitely we will be publishing some guidelines related to the dev VMs, the on-prem environments, but this is actually where we want to learn from your experience in this preview period, and like I'll be happy to reach out for any issue related to this particular area, so we can have like a more methodological way in enabling throttling and disabling throttling if it's not required, especially on those dev boxes. So definitely that's the objective for us. Another question, is that applicable for Power BI as well? Yeah, Power BI in most of the cases, as per my knowledge, use OData, and it will be subject to throttling. And that's pretty much what I know from a Power BI perspective. And I'll be happy also to revisit all of these questions outside of my expertise area, and I will publish them into the facts, so everyone would have his answers, and we can collaborate on this more if required, using the Yammer group. Another question, could throttling settings cause usage to exceed available resources? What other factors besides usage convey the need for resizing? Thresholds are dependent upon the resources reserved for the production instance. If the throttling configuration cannot be changed, but resize is not determined to be a solution, what are other options for performance? Okay, so that's a multi-question. So let me start by the first one. Could throttling settings cause usage to exceed available resources? So throttling actually is to prevent the overage of resources. So the more accurate I will set my priorities, and from a throttling perspective, the more I would be able to preserve the balance between the online users functionalities and my integrations functionalities. So I cannot see how the throttling settings can cause overage, because at the end, if your request is throttled, this means I'm preventing here the system from overage when it comes to resource utilization. Definitely, I would need to revisit and retest my priority settings, which ones is going to be default, which one is going to be lows and highs and mediums, multiple times, and then retest and then see the effect and see the impact. But at the end, when the thresholds and limits of the resources are reached, then throttling will kick in, honoring those kind of priorities. If I move to number 2, what other factors besides usage convey the need for resizing? As I mentioned before, that making sure that optimal configurations are done. There is no code issues when it comes to like bad, for example, code examples or practices or query optimization from a SQL perspective. I would see different areas of the application impacted. I would see more consistent behavior rather than like random patterns. Like, for example, some of I've seen some of the cases that, for example, hey, our system is slow from 9 to 10 a.m. And then definitely once you do the investigation, it's like most of the batches runs, heavy integration runs, all the users like start to log into the system and do their operations. So definitely there is a pattern, but after that the system is okay. So assuming that all of these like conditions are met and it's a consistent behavior, then definitely a system resize needs to take place. And by doing so, I need to go to my estimate. I need to refill it, make sure I have more accurate and close to reality information, and then I would activate this estimate, because I've seen so many cases, like, for example, an environment has been deployed in 2019 or in 2018, and then after like a year and a half, we start to see performance implications and negative impact. And then you go and see the sizing, it's from 2018 since the environment was deployed. And then once you revisit the sizing, you just turn out to be that, hey, this is like a total different environment. And then we take care of that. But I mean, you can proactively do that if you see a need just to be able to get like a more reliable environment. Another question is throttling impact BYOD export? No, that's using DIXF and it's not in our scope. Is the throttling load balanced? Can we omit specific AOSs? So as currently the design is all the workloads in finance and operations when it comes to OData, custom service integrations, batch, sync operations, and kernel operations, and X++ business logic executions. All of these share the same set of resources and the same pool of resources. So the only way to do so is not to send requests to this particular AOS. And this is something that is not, I mean, we do not support this. The only thing that we do support in some of the cases is splitting the batch workloads when we see a need to. But other than that, all of the other resources share the same AOS. So the only way, and we don't have a way to just separate those kind of resources. So the answer would be no, we cannot do that. Another question, after April 2021, could priority-based throttling be overridden by the system? Sorry, I don't get this question, but I'll try to answer if I understand correctly. Like, for example, if I set something to high and the system will still throttle my request. So if that was the question, the answer would be, I won't call this override because, again, it's a finite resource and the system has thresholds. So when I reach the low threshold, I will start throttling the lower request. And then everything that is medium or high will pass. Now the system's still not capable to free up resources and there is more requests or more business operation and more resource constraint, then I will move to the medium. And eventually till I move to the highest priority, in this case, the system will be like at the highest priority and higher thresholds and higher limits, and all of the requests will start getting throttled until the system is free again and can provide more resources. Will Throttling Monitor be available when in Azure Application Insight? The answer is yes and yes and yes. We will onboard to whatever tool is available once it's there for monitoring. I know monitoring aspect has been like a long conversation and it's very like a super critical important aspect. And once we have Azure Application Insight or whatever tool we will use for monitors, then we will provide those data and onboard to this. How about dual write? What throttling priority would be preferred setup for dual write? Again, I'm not expert in the dual write, and I will definitely check back and answer this question in the FAQ and the frequently asked questions section that will be published within this recording on the Tech Talk site, and I will be happy to actually answer these questions. So I think we are almost at time, and I would really like to thank you for your time, and please reach out for us if you need anything, and I would like to see you on the Yammer group, and I will get back to Evan. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Haytham. We would like to get your feedback on today's session. I've posted a short link to the Q&A panel, And we value your feedback and welcome your input on how we did today and what you would like to see in future sessions. The survey scores on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible, and we thank you for your participation in that. As a reminder, the recording for today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenter and a thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us today. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.